Yes, I don't know.
famous on this, and whether they don't listen to your podcast generally, there might be a lot of hits on.
There's a couple of professional wrestlers or amateur wrestlers that are actually starting to get national notoriety who were nice enough when they were just doing, So, but that's the cool thing about professional wrestlers is that in comedians they kind of run parallel in their career. All right. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the DisJointed podcast. This is the podcast that asks the question, what does it take to go from your 9-to-5 life to one of creativity? I'm lucky enough to have people on this podcast who have done that and folks who are working on it on all different phases of that journey. Because for some folks, they seem to know exactly what to do. Some folks they just go with trial and error. And then there's people like me who have no idea what the hell I'm doing. And so I could use all the information I can get. This week is another a fellow comic that I met at the Denver scene. And he has had a long history in the entertainment industry, so I'm very, very lucky to have him on the show. He's nice enough to be here. Mike Langworthy, thank you so much for showing up, man.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. It doesn't seem like it, because I have the curse of apparent insincerity. So it sounds like I'm sarcastic and I don't mean anything.
He's like, it's great to be here. I'm so happy.
Yeah,
no, seriously.
No, but I am.
Yeah.
I am what in me passes for happy.
And that is my dog.
Triply high. Yeah, it's just like 3 pounds of atavistic terror.
Yeah, exactly. He will gut me to death and just be like, The
only time I was bitten by a dog was by a chihuahua.
Really?
It was somebody in the comedy scene in Denver.
Oh, wow.
Never in my entire life have I been bitten by a dog until a few months ago. And she was holding her dog, and I put my hand like this, not even to touch the dog. Just and I had an infected finger for weeks. Jeez.
Like
it's the fascinating thing you're going to be hearing from the next hour.
The other thing is weird is like when a dog doesn't even know how to be a dog. Like this is something with all dogs, we've kind of agreed upon, and we put our hand facing down so that way they can, get to know us and smell and everything, and then decide whether or not they like it. Not to just bite it right out of the way and like, oh, wait.
Yeah, I know. Even I had a dog that bit.
Yeah.
That never bit me.
Right.
And it was a dachshund, baby, a miniature dachshund. It was the baddest ass wherever it was. So if anybody came near my wife, he had decided he was the chief protector of. Anybody came anywhere near her, he would just go and nip them on the ankles to basically say, sorry, this is my property. Keep it away. He never did that to me.
Because he knew.
Well, I was there.
Right.
I was okay with my wife as far as he was concerned. But a stranger, even our next door neighbor, was come over for a party or something like that. If they got too close to her or moved too suddenly, he never bit me. But fucking chihuahua did.
Yeah, it's magic.
Oh, by the way, is there any kind of language?
No, go right ahead.
Good.
I swear all the time on this thing. We try to keep it real here. Well, it's always really weird when I hear any type of professional, like obviously like restaurants, or the professional shows and stuff. That's why I think I initially had an appreciation for like the Gordon Ramsay shows, because it's like, what the fuck are you, that's the kitchens that I worked in. Those are the kind of guys that I worked for, where they were just like, they were super aggressive, they're super nuts, and I'm like, let's not pretend that we're all a bunch of nice people and we decided to be wannabe performers. Let's call it as it is.
Yeah, that's never been my problem.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
So help folks kind of get an idea where you're coming from. What got you into comedy? We'll start way back that way.
Well, I can answer that question 2 ways.
Sure.
It depends on which question you're asking.
Okay.
Are you asking what got me to start performing comedy or what got me into comedy? Because I got into comedy by seeing a show when I was 5 years old.
Gotcha.
And then I started doing comedy, much later than that.
Let's go with doing comedy, because that actually involves like taking movement, walking up the stage.
Sure, yeah. Okay, well, I was raised in Michigan, which was not a hotbed of show business.
Hilarious people out of there, right? Yeah, it's just nothing but jokes 24/7.
Right. Not on purpose.
Especially in the winter. Sure.
Yeah, it's fucking cold. That's a very popular punchline.
That used to be on the license plate from what I understand.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
It absolutely was. Winter Wonderland was on the thing.
Yeah.
What it meant was it's fucking cold.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I was supposed to be, like a normal person, so I went to college and then I went to law school.
Mm-hmm.
And I had always wanted to perform.
Mm-hmm.
And after practicing for about a year, I realized this was going to kill me if I didn't get out of it.
Yeah.
And my personal makeup was such that it would really destroy me psychically, at least, if not actually, if I didn't quit practicing law and start to try to do something creative with my life. And I already knew what that creative thing would be.
Right.
So I quit my law job. I moved to New York.
This would have been when?
Moved to New York in 1978. Started doing comedy for the first time in 1979. And was doing it full time starting in 1981.
Wow, so that was pretty quick. Well, I mean, granted, just as far as like that's 2 years from when you were starting, you moved to New York, and then.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't making a living at that. I was just doing it full time.
Oh, gotcha.
So I had a day job, but I would to me full time means I was in the clubs at least 6 nights a week, probably 7 nights a week, and most nights I would do 2 or 3 clubs in the same night. It was a golden age, and I didn't know it at the time. It was a golden age
Right.
for stand-ups that you could, especially in New York, you could work every night of the week at least one time.
Yeah.
And there was a hierarchy of clubs, but even the low-level clubs had audiences from out of town, so you weren't just performing for a bunch of other comics, you were performing for people who paid to be there.
Yeah, I figure like especially like in Manhattan, just the sheer number of volume of people, there's a good chance that people are going to be out. They're going to be out. Like, the reason I was asking when you were in New York, because I always found that depending on what year you're in New York, you try to put which New York or iteration of New York it was. So it's like when I hear like late 70s, early 80s, I'm thinking Taxi Driver or something like for the whole the darker side where it was like really, really kind of a bit spookier. I was there in '94, and so I think that was like at the end of.
That was the beginning of the Eurotrash era.
Yeah, that's when you see the
became a theme park for wealthy Europeans.
Yeah. It was so funny. I mean, granted, this sketch was only funny to people from New York, but it was on Saturday Night Live. Because Ben Affleck was hosting, and it was about German tourism. It's like, so you could tell some people know that you're German, and it was like they got these big fluorescent, huge coats and everything, like the coats that scream, "Hello, I'm from Germany."
Germany.
And I'm like, yeah, because I remember just waiting tables on the Upper West Side and stuff. You're like, oh, and you just see German tourists coming. You can see them a mile away. You're like, wow, this is interesting.
It's true.
UK tourists, they kind of slip in occasionally. It's not till they start talking, then you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. There's a lot of disposable income in Europe in the 90s.
Yeah.
Not so much anywhere in the 80s when I was there, but there were an awful lot of people. I mean, there's like pretty close to 2 million people lived on Manhattan Island, and during the business day, there was 7 or 8 million people there every day.
Yeah.
And afterwards, a lot of people would stay and do stuff before they went back to the other boroughs, or people would come in from Jersey and Long Island and from Westchester County. So it was very busy. And the Taxi Driver, Manhattan was probably never what Taxi Driver depicts everywhere. So there were places where
There's always like crime everywhere, or like
Yeah.
Midnight Cowboy, where it's like it's super.
My home club was on 9th Avenue and 44th Street. So if you went down to the end of the block, there would be a whole bunch of transvestite prostitutes hailing traffic. But if you went 2 blocks the other way, it was just
Different story, yeah.
a whole different.
Well, the Fashion District is just north of that, I think, right?
Just south of that. Fashion District is below 42nd Street. It's really below 34th Street, but it was counting between 34th and 42nd is like the music district. That's where there'd be clubs and rehearsal spaces.
Yeah.
Tin Pan Alley was there, the famous Tin Pan Alley.
The only thing is where I wasted so much. I mean, because I was just young, and I was like, oh, I don't have any money. I'm just gonna stay inside. I stayed in most of the nights,
Sure.
which was. And
What would you do in Manhattan? it's not like there's anything to do at night.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, well, I'm just hanging out, and I was really nuts. And I'm like, I'm just gonna stay here and play video games and stuff, and then at least I'm here, I guess. But yeah, I walked by. I lived on 105th and Second, right? And my job was like 77th and Broadway, so I would walk some days, to work. Because if you have an hour, it doesn't take that long. So I walked by the Guggenheim, I walked by the Met, and all these great museums. I walked by all these things, and I think I went in once to the Met, and there was things like that. There was all this great music that was going on down in the village. Didn't see any of it. You know what I mean? So it's kind of one of those things where
there's always something to regret.
Yeah.
And Manhattan sort of leaves you with an unlimited amount of things to regret, because I was there at a really happening time, and there was a lot of things I wouldn't do because I was so laser focused on the comedy.
Right.
I could have gone. I did go to clubs that are now famous and whose names are legendary and stuff. I went there, but I didn't go there often.
Yeah.
And I had friends who were opening for music acts at the Bottom Line. A good friend of mine opened for Bruce Springsteen, probably 20, 25 times.
Oh, wow.
He was doing the Bottom Line, and I never once said, "Hey, could you get me?" I mean, he wasn't famous. He wasn't super famous then, but he was. Everybody knew who he was.
Yeah.
And, look at you. Good, thank you for not biting me.
Yeah, exactly.
Chihuahua didn't bite me,
Exactly.
ladies and gentlemen.
It's also because he only has like a couple of teeth, anyways. But
Yeah. There you go.
he's a good guy. Yeah, that's pretty weird. I remember one of the guys I worked with, he was like, I've lived in Manhattan for like 10 years now, and I don't feel like I've seen the whole city. And I'm like, yeah, I can kind of agree. I was there for 5 years. I don't think I knew my neighborhoods. That was it. But I mean, if you couldn't, it's weird. It's an amazing place. But when I hear other comics who go there, like so some of the Denver comics will go there and visit and try stuff out, and I'm like, yeah. So how was it? They're like, yeah, everybody was nice. I'm like, what do you mean everybody was? What? They're like, yeah. I'm like, where did you stay? They're like, Bedford Stuy. I'm like, what?
Yeah, really. My first experience of New York involved walking all the way across Bedford to Stuyvesant, because I got off at the wrong subway stop, and a 17-year-old guy carrying a suitcase, wearing a 17-year-old boy, white boy, walking across Bedford Stuyvesant for about 3 miles with a suitcase in my hand, a sport coat, and a tie. And I was the only white person I saw the entire time I was there, and people would just look at me like,
you lost? I'm like, obviously.
Yeah. They figured that I was either crazy or undercover cop, or any of the other things that I could have mispronounced right there. But I was not bothered by anyone.
Yeah.
When I stopped people for advice, they would sort of look at me like I was a broken toy. They'd say, "Oh, so cute that he doesn't know where he is. He doesn't understand that there's 10 people on this block that could kill him without a moment's hesitation."
I remember, my friend Pete, he grew up around Coney Island, and he was like the bellman or the doorman for the student housing that we're at. So me and my friend John became friends with Pete, still to this day, And I remember he's like, yeah, we're going to go to the Yankee game. I'm like, oh, come on. So we're taking the 6 up to the Bronx, and we're just kind of chatting and stuff, and we get lost in conversation. I'm thinking, hey, Pete, I think we missed our stop. He's like, I've never even been here before. How would you even know? I'm like, because all the white people got off the train 2 stops back. And he was just looking at me, and he just bust up laughing. He's like, you're right. But that was the amazing thing about, because I came from a small town, nowhere on the desert, and then moving to Manhattan, and just taking the train from the A train to JFK, and seeing the massive demographic shifts in different cultures. You get on that train, you get off that train in different, I'm like, wow, this is really, really amazing, It's
a thing you can't do almost anywhere else in the country. Just get on and off a subway train and be in a different environment. Doesn't really say it.
Yeah.
A different world almost.
Well, it's different. Like when you step into Chinatown, you're in Chinatown. You're no longer in New York. You're in Chinatown. There's other neighborhoods and stuff that I saw out in Brooklyn where it was predominantly Hasidic Jewish people.
Yep.
And that's
Greenpoint in those days.
Yeah, it's completely
in my
different.
day, when I was there, maybe not when you were there.
Right.
I think it's been upgraded a bit. There were several. There's an area called Carroll Gardens in Brooklyn, which is where I don't know. Did you ever see some movie that De Niro directed? He doesn't want his kid to get involved with Chaz Palminteri.
Oh,
and it
yeah.
became a musical, Bronx Tale.
Bronx Tale, yeah.
Yeah, it's like that neighborhood, Bronx Tale.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that neighborhood, but it is that neighborhood. Obviously, since it's in Brooklyn, it can't be part of the Bronx.
Right.
But anyway, I went there because a guy I knew from stand-up and his wife lived there. And they were an interracial couple. When they moved into Carroll Gardens, it was the safest, and probably still is the safest neighborhood in the entire city of New York, because the parents and grandparents of all the mobsters lived there.
Right.
And so the mob is just, everybody knows you don't burglarize a house in Carroll Gardens.
Right.
And they hated my friend because he was a black man until they saw him on a Burger King commercial. Because he was also next. He got a room, and all of a sudden he was like the pet kid.
Yeah.
He was the pet black guy in the neighborhood. Hey, Michael, Burger King! You know, just like from like a Woody Allen movie. Burger King! From across the street.
He's got to sit there and wave.
Yeah, it's me. But you know, why not?
You know, it's kind of weird. I think there was like, obviously, I'm not trying to condone racism here, but back in New York, that was a big part of a lot of the jokes. And that was a way that people found a way to kind of get along in a certain respect. You know, granted, obviously, there's always people that are going to take it way too far.
Yeah.
You know, but it was kind of interesting where, you know.
Well, there's racism and there's racism.
Right.
Of course, you shouldn't condone any of it.
Right.
And I don't condone any of it. But what I noticed when I lived in Manhattan, it was probably true when you were living there too, is that the people who live in New York are basically united against the common enemy. And the common enemy is New York City.
Right.
Because it's so full of people. And it's moved so fast and it doesn't change at all. And if you're walking down Fifth Avenue at a busy time of day and you trip and you fall down, chances are people are just going to step over you and keep going. Not because they don't care in the big sense about people, it's because they got places to do. They got shit to do.
I said don't stop because you can't put one foot in front of the other. You son of a bitch! You have no consideration for my days.
And that's when the lowercase racism comes out. This is the guy going to say, the Jews can walk. What's the matter with you? What's the matter with yous? You know?
Like, hey, no, I'm saying they can walk. I'm like you. You can't even. You can't even figure out.
That's when they get to work. Sorry, I'm late. Some asshole fell down.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, what?
And everybody goes, they just nod. Oh, well, no wonder you're late.
Yeah.
Because that's what New York is. New York is the star of the show.
Yeah.
At least that's what it was the whole time I lived here.
That's what I really I really dug about it. I don't know if I'd be able to live there again. I don't think I could. I got too used to having like space
Possessions.
Yeah, things like a car, stuff where peace and quiet, all
the
that.
room we're broadcasting this from, I would say, is about 10 feet by 10 feet. It's probably $1,200.
Yep.
Or maybe more to rent in Manhattan.
This was the biggest room in my apartment back in Spanish Harlem, and then there was basically about the size of the bathroom. That was a loft. That was considered this was considered a one bedroom.
One bedroom.
And I was lucky. That was $650 a month.
Yeah,
that's because
25 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. That was because that's when there only used to be one white guy that lived in Spanish Harlem, and that was me, right? And then apparently
And you're not even a white guy.
No, not really. I mean, I kind of like just walking.
I mean, you look like you're a white guy.
Exactly. That's I can slide in between. I'm like the White Walker, between and just like, what are you talking about? I'm a Latino just enough, and they're like, no, I'm not. It's okay.
Yeah, right. Sure.
It comes in handy, but. So it's the 80s. You're doing stand-up.
That's certainly. You said when you started this, you said it was going
to
go meander a bit. I didn't realize
how much.
But of course, that's me too. I'll go off on a tangent. But yeah, in the 80s, I was there from 1978 to 1986, and I did comedy the whole time I was there. And for 6 of those 8 years, I was doing comedy a minimum of twice a night, usually 3 or 4 times a night. And you could work. Actually, some guys who were living a certain comedy lifestyle never left Manhattan or rarely like Manhattan.
Right.
There's also a time when there were paid gigs in the whole tri-state area. So
Right.
you could, one night you would go, you could do a set early in Manhattan, then you go and do a gig in someplace in New Jersey, and then come back and maybe do a late night set someplace else. Or if you stayed in town, you could go from club to club to club.
Right.
And there were a bunch of clubs that probably still are, but it's probably like the rest of the country. It's not. Comedy's not as in the forefront of show business as it was then.
Well, it's kind of like it goes through these different kind of waves and stuff. I remember I sat in, or I went to a guy who's no longer with us. Deacon Gray would have these like little seminars on how to be be a host or something. So I'm like, yeah, it's worth it to me. I'll go check it out. He's been doing comedy a lot longer than I have. Let's see what he has to say. And he had a lot of good information, you know. But one of the things he was talking about that usually it's after a certain boom of technology is when stand-up had that kind of coincide with the thing of stand-up. So 80s cable television, you know, because they needed the content. And then once again with the internet, then they got another boom.
Sure.
And so I don't know necessarily how it's going now. I don't know, to me, like comedy seems to be kind of like the punk rock, the 80s, like there's the element of counterculture stuff that's really kind of, that's always been there, I guess. But it's
yeah, the thing is that it's, I don't know, I don't like to get like too into the technical stuff about how the business works.
Sure.
Because I'm not sure, and I'm not a business major or anything like that. But it seems to me there's a lot of people who think they're comedians, and then there's a larger than before number of people who are competent but not particularly creative. And I think they brought the level of entertainment value down.
The YouTubers did that a little bit too.
Yeah,
not like they were intentionally trying to lower the bar for everybody, but it's a new thing, and it's
yes, and you can. It's easy to be funny for a minute and a half. I mean,
I get fake at a comedy works every now and then. Yeah, sure.
You get, yeah, but in this, I don't know what it's like in New York. I don't know what it's like in LA, which is where I went after New York. But when I was at both places, if you went to the Improv, you could see 5, 6, 7 comedians who really, really knew what they were doing.
Right.
I mean, they were both creative and full of technique. And it was good value for your dollar if you were going to go out on a night when you were at a business conference for 3 days in the city. It was good value for your dollar. If you go to a comedy show now, there's the Denver Improv, there's Comedy Works. They probably have a pretty professional show.
Right.
I've never been to one of their regular shows.
Yeah, I had one. That was it.
But I'm sure they have headliners who can do 45 minutes and be really good. But most of the places to play in the city now, in Denver now, are open mics or showcases they're using, as charitably put as possible, developing comics.
Right. That's a very nice way to put it.
It's as nice as I can be.
Sure. Well, there was weird. Like, I haven't been as active in the scene as I was, let's say, when I first got here about 5, 6 years ago. But there was times where I'm like, because after a while, you get to know a lot of the different names on the different bills and stuff. And you're like, oh, that's a pretty good show. Oh, that's going to be an amazing show. Like, wait a second, why? I understand why two of those people are on that show. I don't understand why the other 3 are on.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of.
And those are the showcases. Those are higher end shows.
Supposed to be, right? And I think one of the things, this is the weird thing, is like I tried producing a show of my own, and then the venue fell through, and I'm like, all right, for some reason I just never found another venue. Okay, so that's on me. But still, it's kind of like, I don't know, I guess I'm talking out of my ass because I'm not producing anything right now. But part of me was like, do you not
be bitter? Be bitter.
But part of the thing is like, were you not listening to the audience when that other person was performing, or what is it that you saw? I'm curious. When asked, not in a mean way, but I'm like, why did you think that person was going to be a good person to open up the showcase? What showed you that, or gave you the idea that they were going to be able to get laughs right up to set the standard for the rest of the show? Because it just seems like you dug a hole for the other folks to get out of.
I'd like to say 2 things about that.
Sure.
First of all, I've had 3 things. I've had the same experience,
Right.
more often than not. The second thing is, you don't have to be producing a show.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be producing a show to have an opinion. And the third thing is, comedy in particular, I think, is something that a civilian should be entitled to judge, because it's kind of a binary thing, man. You go to a show, you either laugh or you don't laugh. If you don't laugh, the guy's not funny. Doesn't make any difference. I mean, if you're a producer, if nobody's laughing, that's not funny.
Right.
It doesn't make any difference if you think it's funny. It doesn't make any difference if it amuses you personally as the booker. You can't afford, if you're trying to create any kind of name for yourself as a producer of shows, you can't afford to book somebody who doesn't connect with an audience.
Yeah.
The biggest problem I've seen in this town is that there is a larger number than I was used to of people who don't seem to be progressing down the road of figuring out how to connect with an audience as fast as the people that I worked with. But then again, I worked at a time when you did 3, 4, 5 shows a night, no problem, all for people who paid to be there.
Yeah.
So you found out if you were not funny in a hurry.
Yeah. Well, New York, it's different energy too, because it's not. There's no. At least I would assume, I haven't been there since the '90s, but while I was there was no casual artist. There was nobody doing it as a hobby. The reason why you were there is because you either went to school for it, or you were putting all your eggs in that one basket, and you went to the Big Apple to try to make your bones, and you were there to work. And because there were so many other performers, whether it's musician, actors especially, Broadway especially, that they will literally stab you to get you out of the way so they can get that part. You know what I mean? So that's there was that level of like competition, and granted, there wasn't I don't know if there was like the buddy folks and stuff. That's what I thought was so welcoming about Denver when I first got here, is that all the comics were pretty supportive of everybody else, you know, or at least friendly and stuff.
Sure.
I wasn't used to that. That
wasn't New York. That wasn't your experience in New York.
No, but I didn't do comedy in New York.
Oh.
You know, I was just. Everybody had a little bit more of a chip on their shoulder, you know, I thought.
Yeah, it was a pretty supportive community, but when I started comedy, and I just want to interject here, that, you know, I'm pretty happy with the way things have turned out.
Yeah.
I want to say that I did stand-up for a long time, and then I wrote for television for a long time, and I did very well at that, both from the standpoint of getting a lot of jobs and making a good living for my family and all that. So when I'm talking about this stuff, I'm talking like sort of one step removed from that typical hack comics version of the bitter old guy.
Fair enough.
You know, I'm not, you know, what was it? I think it was, I can't remember if it was The Onion or if it was on The Simpsons with Old Man Screams at Cloud.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not that guy. You know, I'm not yelling at kids to get off my lawn.
Right.
And I want any comedian who wants to be a comedian to be successful. So, you know, that isn't going to stop me from having an honest reaction to whatever a person is doing.
Right.
But I want people to be successful. So I just want to preface anything I have to say about the whole scene with that. I'm not sitting here jealous because other people are getting on more open mics than I am.
Yeah.
I don't have to read my resume on your show.
No,
but it's been a kind of run where if I see somebody and they don't amuse me, it's not because I think they're getting ahead of me.
Stu,
hey man,
we're just talking about the Denver comedy scene. You don't have to get all aggro.
Yeah, I know.
Jeez.
Hey, look at he's bigger than half the comics.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm saying comedians are often short. It's a good time, though, man.
Oh, yeah. No, you know, it's pretty weird. I mean, I've kind of got to the point that when I do get frustrated, like if I don't get frustrated with other comics because they're on shows that I'm not on. I get frustrated with myself because I'm like, oh, well, the reason why I'm not on that show is because I didn't try hard enough. I know if I really put my effort on something, I usually get pretty much the stuff that I'm shooting for.
Yeah.
So, usually, but I'm very selective about what it is that I'm trying to get.
Sure.
But I don't know. I mean, it's I think the comedy scenes and stuff, even just around the country, every single city has like a little bit of a comedy scene or a place that you really wouldn't expect it to. So that I think is a great thing, you know.
Yeah, that is the biggest change from when I started. I mean, I lived in suburban Detroit when I was practicing law, and I had to move to New York in order to do comedy because there was the scene that I'm talking about that was so active started. There were some clubs in Manhattan, but there weren't many clubs around the country. There were 2 or 3 venues you could go to outside of New York City and perform. But unless you were on Johnny Carson and got to be well enough known that you could work in Las Vegas, it was just a cab driver's life for you.
Yeah.
So you were either making a really good living or you're making no living because there was no money to be made.
Being the typical.
They weren't even paying the acts a cab fare at Catch Rising Star and at the Improv when I started out.
Oh, wow.
So you would get up and perform literally for nothing.
Wow.
Not just for not enough money to live on.
Well, you know, I can kind of understand performing for no money if there's like only 3 people in the house. You know, like I kind of get that. I'm like, no, I get it. But it's like if it's for, let's say, a packed house, I'm like, I got a 2-drink minimum. And people, I see food on the table. So you gotta fork over more than $20, you know. But
I'm not saying we liked it.
Yeah, no, but that was something.
But we had our eye on a bigger prize. You know?
Right.
There was the price of admission to getting an audition to be on Late Night with David Letterman or on the Tonight Show, which were both huge and very influential in whether you had a career or not.
Oh, yeah.
The price of admission was working your way up in the club and getting competent and getting good, honing your 5-minute set, auditioning it, getting feedback, getting told no, doing it again. That was the whole cycle that you were on, and they were willing to do it because that's what they wanted. And you had to want it really badly in those days. Again, not screaming at a cloud. I did want it really badly, and I worked very hard at it. And I got pretty good.
So what got you into writing? Like, because I mean, it seems like this is like stand-up was obviously the first love of performing. Yeah. And then finding out like, oh, I can also do this as well.
Well, I wrote stuff. I started out when I was in college. I was on the student radio station. I would write sketches and perform them on my late night shows. And I did that. And when I was in law school, I had to write a lot, so I was comfortable writing. Obviously, you don't write jokes when you're writing.
No, think about it.
For law school.
Exactly. Can you believe
that? Call this a murder?
Should have seen you last night at the Improv.
Yeah, that was killing. That was killing, my friend. But at any rate, the point is that I was comfortable with being articulate on paper and when I had to speak because of some training that I had. So that's how I got into writing. And of course, when you were a stand-up, you're writing all your own material. Right. And occasionally gigs would come along that would require me to do writing in addition to the stand-up. So when I hit the level where I felt like I was a solid pro that can be considered to be the star of a sitcom or the funny neighbor or get put into a part in a movie, which is sort of the next step in the career of somebody who starts out in stand-up. At that moment in time, Andrew Dice Clay and Sam Kinison became, and like virtually overnight, the hottest acts in show business. And that's not what I did. And I could see that there was going to at least have to be another whole turn of the Mandela before I would even get anybody to look at me, because I was more of a different kind of comic. Right. If I had hit my skill peak at the same time as Seinfeld, I would have been a guy from that era that got a lot of breaks in all probability. Because it's not because I'm so great, but because it's a marketplace. Yeah. And when they're looking for a certain type, the first guy they look for is the most famous, and they just start going through the list, and I would have been somewhere on the list. But when I was not on any list that also contained Andrew Dice Clay's name, unless it was a list of everyone on planet Earth. Yeah. So I quit. I went back to practicing law briefly, and that immediately became clear that it was even worse this time than it was the first time, because I'd had a taste of freedom. Exactly. This whole show is about finding your creative, moving from a non-creative to a creative life. So for me, being a lawyer was not a creative endeavor. It is for some people. It wasn't for me. And I immediately realized my horrible mistake when I did it.
Right.
So I started writing spec scripts, and I acquired a partner who was someone who had done some work before. And we sold a script. He was friends with a couple of big name directors, and they put him in their movies all the time, so he went off to do like 4 movies in a row. And so I was left with no writing partner, so I started writing on my own and got lucky and got hired. And it's the kind of career where once you've been hired, it's a little easier to get hired.
Right.
And once you've worked with a number of people, there becomes a word of mouth about the quality of your work. And you start to get more work, or not, if your work isn't very good, or if people just don't like you. And apparently fewer people didn't like me, and fewer people didn't think that I was a crummy writer than thought I was okay. So I started to get work, and I moved up the ladder. That took place over a period of years. And as boring as this has been, actually going into detail about it would
be even more like, oh, geez.
Absolutely put you in a coma, no question.
Right. Well, no, I mean that's one of those things that it's kind of interesting that like you find this job that you work for and you're becoming more and more. I mean, you're still using your creativity in order to do it, but now like at that point, are you get this stand up that had to go by the wayside, or?
Yeah, it overlapped for a while when I was first trying to break into it. I never totally stopped when I went back to practicing law. I would just do a few things. It's, people would call me every once in a while, and I'd do a little low-level gig or something like that. But I wasn't out in the clubs trying to make my name anymore. I had given up on that, and we were trying to have kids at the time, and my wife had a very stressful job that was getting in the way of feeling good about doing that, so I started looking for another way to make a living. Law was my first go-to because of the training I'd had and the experience I'd had. But then I was fortunate enough to get on this, hamster wheel of writing for television, and stand-up fell completely away then because it satisfied me creatively enough so that I didn't feel like I needed an outlet like that.
Okay.
When you work in sitcoms, there's a number of different roles that you have to fulfill to be a valuable member of a writing staff. And one of them is to be able to help in what's called the writer's room.
I imagine that's like a Shark Tank, and just everybody's trying to get their ideas across, and you've got like, I don't know, because I always hear about the SNL writing room and how difficult that was. That was kind of a weird way that they,
it can be like that.
Yeah.
And sometimes some of the shows I was on was like that. But every show every show reflects the showrunner's mindset. And if the showrunner's mindset is, hey, let's get together and put on the best show we can, then everybody, certainly people are competitive and they want their jokes to be in the show and they want their scripts to get rewritten less than somebody else's script is rewritten, so there's competitiveness in that way. But it's held under the umbrella in a show like I just described of, okay, we're all pulling in the same direction.
Right.
Like the thing with Saturday Night Live is that it has reflected the show creator. Well, it's not even that. The producer, Lauren Michaels, has a way of management that lends itself to competitiveness.
Right.
And a lot of people get on the show because they figure, oh, I got my foot in the door with a writing gig, but I'm going to start pitching.
Yeah.
I'm going to be outrageous in the room and pitch in the room and pitch stuff for myself and pitch stuff for me and my buddy to do. And a lot of writers have become performers and then very successful because of that. Yeah. Starting with Chevy Chase, who started way at the beginning of the show.
Right. That was one thing that was really strange, like hearing stories about like some folks who are really strategic about it. Like Sandler always wanted to make sure if he was going to write anything, it was going to be for Weekend Update. He always wanted to make sure that he was on Weekend Update, at least one of his characters and stuff. And so like, yeah, that was definitely a way to kind of stand out, and then they also knew that was just a springboard onto some other stuff that they knew that they were going to be there for a long time,
Yeah, well, that's the same guys that managed Woody Allen managed a lot of the performers on Saturday Night Live and the writers on Saturday Night Live right from the very beginning. And so, if you did okay and you got yourself on some stuff, then you would find yourself into movies and TV shows that were spearheaded by Maura Bresner, blah 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 blah, which was the big management firm.
That was where I saw the Netflix movie A Stupid and Futile Gesture about
Daryl Hammond.
About
Daryl Hammond.
No, the guy who started one of the guys who started National Lampoon.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Doug.
The guy who died very young.
Yeah.
He wrote Animal House.
Right.
Yeah, I'll think his name.
Doug Kenny.
Doug Kenny, yes. Doug Kenny.
Yep.
Doug Kenny, who was a genius, but didn't take good care of himself.
Yeah. Well, no, it was weird. It was like there were certain things, like a good piece of cinema creative thing is when you could watch it multiple times and you get different aspects of the story every time you watch it. There was because I thought it was pretty cool because it's kind of like, oh wow, so a lot of the writers from National Lampoon went over to the first seasons of Saturday Night Live.
Right.
That's really interesting and stuff. I'm like, oh cool. And then the more I kept watching, then I start seeing, like, if you're familiar with bipolar disorder, then you kind of like, oh, I can see where where a lot of this stuff was coming from. And then it's I don't know. I'm like, oh, that's a good piece of art. That's good entertainment. Where you're finding connected.
Yeah. Was there a lot of talk about Michael O'Donoghue in that show?
Well, there was. Yeah.
He was really the creative center of Saturday Night Live for the first 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, he was.
If it was that long.
The way that they kind of portrayed him. Who was the guy? The guy who was in Reno 911. Who played Lieutenant Dangle? Gosh, I forgot what the guy's actor's name. But either way, he was the way that the performer portrayed him was like kind of this real like anarchistic, like kind of loose cannon, where he was like, you know what, fuck you, and like he's screaming at somebody on the phone, and he's basically screaming at Columbia House because of their shitty records, and like he was like this big anarchist, like no fear about anything. I'm like, wow, this is crazy fun writer stuff, but.
Super funny though. Super funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's the Venn diagram of creative genius and good person. Mm-hmm. It may intersect, but there's not a whole lot of.
There's not a whole
lot of middle area,
Well, that was good.
He was one of the people who he really was incredibly creative. And also apparently just had an anger problem.
Yeah.
But he did it. But he usually did that in a funny way. People would laugh while he was in the middle of being really, really angry. People would be laughing because the way he did it was so over the top and so crazy.
Yeah, and that's great until I guess it stops being funny. I don't know.
Until he becomes your boss.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, jeez.
You become the guy on the other end of the phone.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I always thought that was super interesting, like before we hit record, I was talking about the house that we lived in. Where
did we hit record?
Yeah.
Or we just talked?
Oh shit!
Oh my god! Go show.
But what I found
there'll be nothing for no one to watch this week.
Exactly. No, what I found out is when hanging around somebody who's very creative, and then you start creating yourself, then once you kind of get that energy, that momentum going, it starts to become cyclical. So I would put together these things that I would call like artist haven. It's not like that, it was super pretentious, but we would take the whole day like a Saturday at my friend's house, and we would start at like 10 in the morning. I mean, whatever you're going to work on, whether it was painting, it could be anything as long as it wasn't music, because it's kind of hard to work on writing poetry if the guy next to you is working on his Norwegian death metal riffs and stuff, right? So, but we left the music till later. So, but we would work at 15-minute blocks. We'd stop, break for 10 minutes. Everybody would either have a cigarette or be like, hey, how's it going? Hit the timer again. and then everybody would go back. The whole day melted away super fast because everybody's just in their own space, but they're all working on different stuff. And then around 6 o'clock, it'd say, if you want to keep working, you can, but then that's when musicians would come in, and there would be this jam session that went on to like 4 in the morning. And it was like an artistic creative marathon because you were completely drained. But the most awesome thing about it, like my buddy Clay would he would record all of the music jam and just record it on his computer, and then like we set up the blocks. When you go back to listen to it, you're like, okay, holy shit, did we create that? Wow, you'd be surprised at how much farther than you were really able to work than we thought that we did. And it was something I kind of missed about that. But
was this in New York?
No, this was in Phoenix. This was in Arizona. This is something we did a couple of times, but I always thought, I'm like, it'd be nice to kind of have something like that again, You
should do that. I was going to ask you if you were doing it here, and if not, why not?
That's a good question. I don't have the space for it, I think. Like the jam session was one of the things that I really kind of missed, but at least as far as that, because I don't know, it'd be writing, painting, whatever. Some folks would do video editing and just kind of set up their station and just stick with that. But it was a nice way. I think when you have like kind of like a barrier around, so this is where I'm going to work, this is what I'm going to be doing, and then you're around other people who respect that as well, you can get a lot of shit done because I'm sure, like trying to work from home, as soon as like, all right, I'm going to start here, and then suddenly phone rings.
Sure.
Hey, I got a problem. I'm sure you do. Hold on 1 second, and then it's just one interruption after the other.
It's kind of important not to respond to that. Like, I have to turn off all the internet. I just close my computer.
Yeah.
Even if I say, I'm not going to get on whatever, XYZ social media or on the internet or watch YouTube videos or something like that. It's just always there, and it's one click away from distraction, which is too easy. It's too easy. When I was doing it the first time in the 80s, you didn't have that option.
Right.
And I surely would have taken advantage of the option.
Oh, totally.
And I wouldn't have done nearly as much as I did do. And not that I was that great at it, but
just out of nowhere, you're trying to work on something like, who's the bassist for the metal band Striper? Hold on for 1 second. You're like, why am I thinking about that? Why don't I even give a shit about that band?
Yeah.
I got to find out.
I was watching a movie just before I came here, and there's an actor in it who I know this guy. He's a famous character actor. And it's the sort of thing that I obsess on. So I've been trying to figure out this guy's name, and it's like a personal victory to me that I haven't looked it up on the internet. So I'm trying to actually remember it.
What movie was it?
It's The Mighty Quinn with Denzel Washington.
Okay.
And I did a series with the woman who played his wife in that movie.
Who played his wife? I haven't seen that movie.
Cheryl Lee Ralph is her name. She was one of the Dream Girls in the Broadway show Dream Girls. Okay. But it doesn't matter what it was, but except that it was another thing that got me to stick with the movie. And then this guy comes on, and I know this guy.
Yeah.
And I do obsess with this because I have a great memory for faces.
Right.
Terrible memory for names. Well, it doesn't matter.
No, I used to be really good at remembering actors and stuff, like character actors especially. They're like, I remember that guy. I remember that. I was always.
Well, once I get it for life.
Yeah.
But I can't remember. I know Emmett is in the guy's name. One of his names is Emmett. But I want to say, and I think there's 2 initials, but I can't remember his name. It's crazy nobody watches this thing. I should change the name to Old Man Tries to Remember.
You know what? I'm sure there's got to be a video or a channel on there where people are like, hey, who was in that movie? Like, what movie? Wait, which one?
Oh, yeah, I know. It's like Sunshine Boys.
Yeah, my mom would always do that. Damn, who was in that movie from that one thing? Like,
yeah.
All right, Mom. So then I had to figure out, like, process of elimination. When did you see this movie? Is it a new movie or an old movie?
Yeah.
And then I have to go through this thing. And I'm like, oh, you're thinking of Tim Curry now. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. How did that work? But so you're working, you're doing all this creative stuff, and then eventually, what brought you back to performing stand-up again?
Well, in 2008, the Writers Guild went on strike.
Right, I remember that.
Same year, my son who is really, really smart.
Mm.
Got admitted to a boarding school in Massachusetts. We were living in California. I didn't want to live 3,000 miles away. Every time there's been a strike, the Writers Guild, there's been a retrenchment that takes 2 or 3 years to recover from if you were a guild writer. And I didn't want to spend 3 years kick-starting my writing career while my son was 3,000 miles away in a boarding school.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate enough that some good things had happened for me financially, and it allowed me to move from Los Angeles to a place that was about 90 minutes away from the school that he was going to.
Okay.
So I lived there while he was spending 3 years in that school. And my son went off to the University of Chicago. We finished a couple more years in Maine while my daughter finished high school. Then we discovered, or at least I discovered, that she hated Maine. And I'd lived almost my entire adult life was either in New York or California. And even before that, it was Detroit, which is a pretty big city too. Yeah. So there's less than 1 million people living in all of Maine.
Right.
In a 60,000 in
It's a big place, yeah.
That's the biggest city in the state, 60,000.
Wow.
There's one area code in Maine.
Oh, nice.
And,
I was like, wait a second, a teenager doesn't like
I thought it was really nice to live in a kind of friendly, homey place. And then it turned out to be superficially friendly. So I and my kids would never be Mainers. And their kids might be Mainers. It would be at least my grandchildren before you could guarantee that they would be accepted as actual Mainers. So,
you were always just going to be an outsider.
And my daughter hated the place. I grew up in Michigan, and I've had all the winter I need. The real winter that I need for my lifetime. So we decided to look for another place. My daughter happens to be developmentally disabled and also a huge fan of musical theater. And loves to sing, loves to dance. There are 2 theater companies in Denver that have a theater that is not just friendly but encourages people with special needs to perform in it.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
So we came here. I'm now helping to write those shows.
Cool.
And somebody that had worked for me as a writer invited me to go to a stand-up show about 1.5 years ago where she performed. And I followed her and her friend around for the whole weekend. And I had been thinking about maybe giving it a shot again, just for fun.
Right.
And by the end of the weekend, they had talked me into going up and doing 5 minutes. So I did, and it's like smack.
Yeah.
I assume. Not that I ever did any. Anyway, the point is, it's like what people say.
Yeah.
Hideous, horrible, addictive drugs are. And so I just started doing it, and then I started writing. And, it's the thing that I love most in the world. So I don't know if I'll ever. I don't even know what the end game might be.
Right. But it's just for that moment that you're on stage and you're like, oh, I'm happy doing this.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that kind of keeps me at least moderately sane, I think, is that if I know that I'm still being a performer, if I'm trying to entertain people, as opposed to that time in my life when I wasn't, and I was setting a torch to everything around me, figuratively, that I'm like, okay, at least, I have something that it is that I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yes, it's a different feeling than the other way, which just sounds stupid to say, except that there really isn't a better way of explaining it to somebody who hasn't gone through the same thing. I've never found one anyway. So the way your view of life formulates when you're trying to be creative with your life is so completely different than the way your view of life looks when you're just trying to make enough money so that you can pay your rent and buy food and clothing for your children and stuff like that. It's a completely different worldview. And if you're lucky enough to be able to make a living while you're doing something creative, then it's, let's say, even like a third thing, which is amazing. And so, I don't have to worry about whether my kids are going to be thrown out on the street tomorrow because they're grown up.
Right.
And my creative passion is really in writing and performing. I found that I had quite an affinity for writing scripted material as well, so I'm still doing that, but I had a lot more passion for it than I thought I was, because I only went into it to try and make a living without doing something so uncreative that it would kill me.
Some of this not going to keep you on the road 24/7. I mean,
Yes.
for 10 months out of the year.
Yeah, and if you're lucky,
Yeah.
from what I hear about the scene, unless you're like one of a handful of comics today, you can be on the road 40, 50 weeks a year and be just scratching out a living.
Yeah, like, I mean, if I'm going to spend that much time, I want to be making a bit more than 40, 50K a year. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like it's one of those things where I'm like, oh,
That's gross, minus expenses. It's even.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, God.
It's like, hey, you're making $1,000 a week. I'm like, yeah, but 400 of that is involved in your travel and just your upkeep. You know, that was one of the things
And you're living in a hotel.
Yeah.
Because if you don't make 1,000 next week, you're falling behind.
You know, it's so funny. Every now and then I see these really nice vans. Part of me is like, I might have to get one of those, and I'm like, I know in me, I would stay in that for maybe 1 week, and before I was like, screw this, I'm getting a hotel or some shit, you know. But I don't know. It's been an hour. This has been so awesome. Yep. We're at 55 minutes right now, so this is these things. Luckily, if they're good, they go by super quick.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're like, I felt every minute of this pocket. But
yeah, we just asked the viewing public.
Sure.
He was pretty much dominating it, right? Like, I didn't get it really. Barely got a word in. Is that my reading that correct? Because how it felt over here is what I'm saying. Is it's like it's the Dave Germain Listen to Me talk show. I don't. Maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not that. I'm just saying. You know that you get a feeling after a while. You learn to trust your instincts.
Yeah, 263 episodes of just me listening to me talking.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's what I had a chance to
Should I just record like 10 minutes of in case you want to break up some of your monologue?
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm kidding. What am I? He's just a nice guy. What did I do? I kicked him when he was down. He wasn't even down.
Yeah.
I just kicked him.
There's a couple episodes actually in that catalog where somebody kind of like clammed up a little bit. So rather than having okay, well, tell you what, because I usually obviously you've got a lot of things to talk about, which is great. So then I can just go, that's cool, right? You know. And then there's other times where it's completely the opposite, where I can barely say anything, and I'm like, all right, well, that's cool as long as there's content coming out. Then there's other folks who are like, hey, we'll be talking as soon as I hit record. And then they just kind of shut up, and so then that one I tend to have to carry a little bit more. But
did you ever see that Warner Brothers cartoon about the frog?
Oh yeah,
Such a great singer, except when anybody was watching.
What was the name of that? They finally gave it a name, Montana.
The frog was named Michigan J. Frog.
Yeah, because I remember that. I'm like,
he was the frontman for the WB. It became the CW.
Yeah.
That was a radical change, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Well, they went
from associated with WB anymore.
I remember they had great works like Homeboys in Space. That was one of the shows I remember. I was like, interesting. Hey, you know what? Those guys are getting paid. I'm not. Who the hell am I? All right, but television. I remember it was never like, let's be experimental. Like, hey, let's not.
But I did a show for the WB.
Oh, really? Which one? Wait, it wasn't Homeboys in Space, was it? Because I feel like I just shot it.
No. I want to say that was Charlie Kaufman, the guy who did adaptation.
Huh.
But no, I did a show that was on for 2 years under 2 different names.
Huh.
Actually, I did 3 shows for them. One was called Zoe Duncan, Jack and Jane 1 year, and then the next year was just Zoe.
Huh.
That was Selma Blair and Michael Rosenbaum, who did Lex Luthor for 10 seasons. And a lot of people think he's the best Lex Luthor, which is high praise.
Yeah.
Considering Gene Hackman played Lex Luthor.
Right. I mean, I think he's had more time with the character, obviously, so he's got a lot of chance to get more subtlety. It's kind of like when they're talking like, who's the best Joker? I'm like, well, it's like trying to say who's the best Batman, because if you were into the 66 Batman, then Adam West,
sure.
because that's Batman. But then again, so is Michael.
I think the only thing we can agree on is the worst Batman was George Clooney.
I was really, really hoping that one.
Yeah,
oh my god!
Nice if you could have been.
I was hoping they were going to do like a more serious, a darker version, because the movie that came out before that was Peacemaker, right? Mm-hmm. And so where he's playing the spec ops guy or whatever, and there was a scene where there was this big car chase, and this guy just killed his friend, and he's walking like through like a crowded plaza somewhere in Europe, and the look on his face is where he's going there to put two into this guy's head and then walk out. He does not give a fuck about it. I'm like, that's going to be an awesome Batman. But then Joel Schumacher was like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to do it's this, and did some
homoerotic
exactly exploration
in his ward.
Yeah, exactly. Where I'm like, oh my god. But because I was thinking if they were going to do like the Frank Miller Batman, which basically that was more in line with Ben Affleck was doing, right? Which I'm like, I thought that would have been pretty cool, but I was gonna say with Jokers, like I haven't seen the new Joker movie yet. Everybody says it's great, but I think like Mark Hamill to me, because he spent the most time with that character doing the voiceovers for all the Batman cartoons and stuff. His Joker to me is the most disturbing and the most I don't know, just the most amazing out of all of them. I think.
He's been pretty fantastic for a long time.
Yeah.
I always thought I felt bad for him because he didn't go on to that sort of marquee stardom that Harrison Ford went on.
Well, because they just wanted to see Luke Skywalker and anything else other than that.
Yeah, but then when he went into the voiceover business, he's just like amazing. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't seem to have cared. I think he had a piece of it, by the way. First of all, the first Star Wars. I think all of the principals in the first Star Wars got a piece of it.
Might as well, they probably weren't getting paid much else,
it was like maybe really low four figures.
Yeah.
For making a movie.
Jeez. But still,
Harrison Ford was the carpenter.
Yeah.
How much did they have to pay him?
Right.
We'll give you overtime.
Yeah. Did he do Apocalypse Now before or after that? I don't know. Before? Yeah, and that role was just basically came in along.
Right.
And then just walked out like, all right.
Stands in the background when G.D. Spradlin.
Right.
Oh, sense of duty. Oh my God, you just hate these people are just awful human beings. I don't know who they're sending you to kill, but you shouldn't too. You know what I mean? There was saying how big of a steak, isn't it? No, that was the steaks were with what's his name, Kilgore.
Right.
Duvall. But
it's so weird, that movie. It's kind of weird. If you haven't seen it, watch Hearts of Darkness, the documentary about Apocalypse Now before watching the movie, and you see a whole completely different movie. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, I currently am in my queue to watch Redux again because there's so much more stuff in Redux than there was in the first movie.
No,
you go.
My favorite scene out of the documentary is Francis Ford Coppola bitching about Marlon Brando. He says, "You think I need him? I don't need him. I'll get De Niro. I'll get Pacino. I don't need his." And I'm like,
sure. Yeah, he only made your movies.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was the reason he got a lot of the funding because he had Brando in it. But I remember my film and TV teacher back in New York, who's been on the podcast before, Raleigh Moreland, was like, because he showed us this, he's like, just understand that everybody can be replaced. There's always somebody, there's always somebody else, and that was the main reason why he wanted us to see that. Is that this is Brando, that's the creme de la creme of acting at the time, and he's like, no, I'll get somebody else. It's like, so try to remember, because we're all super egotistical anyways, and he's like, you really need to, this is how, he taught us how to be.
Nobody is irreplaceable.
Exactly. He gave us an idea, taught us how to behave when we're on set. He was like, all right, this is what you do, all right? Little things I get here. When it's time to eat, who eats first? Like the stars? Like, no, you let the tech crew go first.
Yep.
Always let tech first and stuff. Even if they say go ahead first, wait. Find something else to do. Wait for them to go first. And I'm like, oh. Because of the one gig that I did have, I did. I'm like, I remember what Raleigh told me. And after that, everybody in the tech crew was way nicer to me.
Yeah.
Not that I was being a dick before, but they're like, oh, okay.
Sure.
And, I don't know, but that movie was it was super awesome.
Yeah. The actors, if you've ever wondered why there are certain actors who are always on a TV series, whether they've been on a hit or not, they're like Robert Urich was one of these guys.
Oh yeah.
He had like 12 television series. It's because of the way they treated everybody on the set. They just keep getting hired and hired and hired because they solve problems for people. They don't make problems for people. I had a friend from the stand-up world who he was a pretty good stand-up, but he came to LA and decided that he wanted to be an actor. He got a lot of gigs, some of which he got through his connections to stand-ups and then went on to have series, but a lot of which he got just because he was a decent actor. But he did this. He would give you the same performance when he shot it that he gave you when you auditioned for it.
Yeah.
And he would find a place to sit out of the way, but where he could hear the assistant director.
Right.
So he'd be there, you'd have his newspaper, you'd have a book or whatever, and he'd just be sitting there, and then they said, okay, everybody for scene 3,
he's up
pull
there.
the book, and there he goes. And he just got called back and brought back on show after show after show. Because then I had a lot of friends who were stand-up comics who thought they were the show.
Right.
They get hired for a three-line part. And they're like, where do you want me to sit? And they're trying to make jokes to the cast.
Yeah, like, hey, I need to focus, man.
That's a $10,000 joke you just told because it took 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, what was the best example of assholing your way out of the business or pissing off the wrong people? Was Grace Under Fire, I thought, like at least in the 90s.
Oh, Brett Butler?
Yeah, Brett Butler. Yeah. Which I feel bad. I mean, I wonder, I don't know, hopefully she's bad. I don't know anything about her.
No, she's doing well now.
Cool.
I actually know her a little bit. And,
awesome.
Yes, I know a lot of people in the show. People with bigger names than her, by the way. Anyway, she was having a mental breakdown.
Right.
She didn't really know how to handle success because she went from nothing to a TV series right away, and it was a popular series.
Super popular, yeah.
And then, so she had problems with drugs and alcohol that were motivated by a level of, I don't want to say mental illness because that's not what I mean. I don't mean it in a
fame is a weird thing. Yeah, no.
It's whatever. Fame sort of magnifies who you are.
Right.
And if you're great, a wonderful human being, it makes you even more of that.
Exactly.
And if you are a troubled person, it makes you even more of that.
Totally.
Because when you get the thing that everybody in the world wants, and you're still not happy, what do? And she sort of had that problem. And she had to go through, that, and go through bottoming out, becoming sober.
Yeah.
And she has been, I know that she did a recurring role for the last couple of seasons, I think.
Oh, really?
On The Walking Dead.
Oh, wow.
And she is, working in various capacities and stuff. So
does she do stand-up anymore or no?
I think she does occasionally.
Oh, okay.
It's not something that she tries to feature.
I know the last
She's a good joke writer, by the way. Very good joke writer.
Oh, that was super awesome. Some of the things that she said was like, what was the most awesome joke there? She's like, this is a guy who's never had sex without hearing the words, "No, Daddy, don't." And I was like, oh, damn, that's dark. Holy shit. But
she's pretty wonderful that way.
Yeah. I think a friend of, an acquaintance, I think I can call her a friend, somebody I went to school with who ended up doing, instead of going into acting, she went into stand-up and nobody knew about it. And then she got, Brett Butler did like a showcase featuring female comedians, and she happened to be one of them. So I was like, oh, that's pretty awesome. So, it was, that was the last time I heard, and that was years ago, I think. But
well, she came back and she was a judge, I think, on Last Comic Standing at one point. And this is all at post-traumatic stress.
Right.
So she's,
that's what that's
good. But there are people who have just assholed themselves out of the business.
Yeah.
And like for real assholes, they're just bricks. And
but it was, I feel like if it wasn't for that, she would still if it wasn't a hit show, if things kind of just went on those things at normal level, I think.
Yeah, well, if she'd had a chance to, probably one of the better things that happened professionally to Jerry Seinfeld was getting on Benson and his option not being picked up after the first 13 weeks or season, whatever it was. And
I forgot that he was on there.
So he had to go back. He had to wait his turn again.
Yeah.
You know, but he played the long game his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
The next time he got a series that he owned a piece of, and then he was the central character of.
Yeah.
Because he had the leverage at that later time
Mm-hmm.
to do that. He didn't just have to be a guy who came in, auditioned,
He's
had a few good Carsons, and people said, well, let's put him in the show. Maybe people like him.
Yeah.
That's what happened the first time. The second time, he also got a world-class writer to collaborate with.
Yeah, and it's interesting where they came up with just the way I remember it was marketed. It's part sitcom, part stand-up. And I remember that scene on the commercials all the time. And they kind of they phased that out, I think, after about 2 seasons, I think. Yeah, and so they would always set up the idea of what this next scene is probably going to be about, and then kind of go on from there. So it was pretty awesome with that. They had a great cast and everything. But yeah, I don't know. It's such a fickle thing, but.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad to hear Red Pepper's doing great. You heard it here first, folks. She's doing just fine. But no, that's. No, I was trying to end the show, but that was 15 minutes ago. Shit. All right.
Yeah. I'm sorry I took so much more of your time.
This valuable time that I have, especially on a weekend.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
is there get out and walk the dog?
You got any shows coming up that you? This is probably going to come up in a week, so.
I'm probably going to perform at Noonan's a week from Friday.
25th or something like that, or?
Yeah, the 25th of October.
That might be. Let me see who's been saying. That might have been Terry Barton Gregg, who's like, make sure to plug the show.
No, she didn't tell me to plug the show. I'm not even sure I'm going to be performing in it, but I will know. I do know it'll be a good show.
Yeah.
I do know it'll be a good show.
Yeah.
And she's starting to use me to host her shows because she has grasped from an early stage the importance of a decent host of a show. And I haven't.
I gotta get her back on the show.
As great as I am at other things.
She's somebody.
I am a competent host. So.
Yeah, I gotta get her back on the show. She's an interesting guest.
Yeah.
So.
Well, she and Chuck Roy and I are trying to have formed a consortium who's trying to produce monthly shows with real live professional comics.
You guys are doing a pretty good job of it. I was thinking it's kind of like it's a part. Well, it's kind of weird. I consider this is way more of a professional show than what you guys put on. And then there's hey, a group of my friends, hey, we're gonna go to a brewery and do this, which is good too. I'm not trying to shit on that, but it's kind of no, there's certain
Yeah, I think there's a business angle to both of those things, and the lock you're trying to unlock in both cases is how do you monetize the kind of show you want to do?
Right.
What is going to motivate the millennial and slightly older group of people to come and see a show versus what Terry has been doing. And I came very late to that party, but what she's been doing it quite successfully, finding a formula that gets people with disposable income. They're either empty nesters or they get a babysitter, and they're willing to spend what it takes to go out and have a show. And to put on a show that's entertaining for them can be a different challenge than a show that is entertaining for people in another demographic.
Yeah, no, she's been really, really smart about that. Every time that I've seen, I've been to the Float Your Boat show, showcase that you guys done. I was a full house. I've been to Noonan's before and stuff. That's full too. And I'm like, wow, she's one of the few producers that you pretty much, if you know you're going to be on her show, that you're performing in front of an audience. So you better come here with your game. You don't come here to work out shit.
No, you don't.
Should have been worked out already.
Yeah, and you don't bring a piece of paper up on stage.
Yeah.
What else?
All right, I'll close out with this, and I'll leave you guys with this. You're like, get out of here, you bastard. But either way, you get
eating ass is fun.
Yeah. Should we talk about that? No. Let me see if I can get the details here real quick, and then we'll end on that.
Okay. Well, for the Noonan show,
it's
the 25th, and the show starts at 8.
All right. Well, I'm not finding that anyways.
And then there's a show in November called the Dirty Christmas Show. So I'll be on that.
Awesome.
With specialty materials. It'll be with a incredibly dark holiday feel. It's usually on the weekend of Thanksgiving.
Right. That was
the weekend right after Thanksgiving. So.
Let's see here. You're definitely on the poster, so I'm sure I'm assuming you're performing. But Derek Rush is the headliner. Also, Steve Young, Michael Florwax, and Kit Demko.
Kit Demko, yeah. She's from New York.
Oh, really?
She just moved out here. I think her day job is practicing law.
Whoa.
And I've seen her. She's funny. She's got
Awesome.
a good one-liners.
Cool.
And Michael Florwax is a legend. A legend, I tell you. He used to be the biggest name in radio in town. I don't know if you know him.
No, I'm not familiar.
Yeah, Michael Florwax was I think afternoon drive time.
Oh, wow.
At one of the big stations in town for years.
So
really funny.
The radio DJ is really good actually do stand up. That's great. Yeah. Well, that's awesome.
I think they hired him to be on the radio from watching this.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't
That's a completely different type of comedy and stuff than like there's times I've seen like some radio. I mean, back when radio was a much bigger thing, but you could tell like, okay, I know you started stand up and you got into radio about 2 years into doing stand up, and so I could tell by the level of your jokes that's coming out there. You're like, all right, just play the hook.
Yeah. Hey, can I plug one more thing?
Sure, absolutely.
I'm sorry, just very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds on 29th, this TV series that the Colorado Public television station on Channel 12, is it?
Okay.
Does every year, and Terry Barton Gregg produces the comedy portion of that show. There are like 8 or 9 or 10 comics do it every year, and the season I think just started or is just about to start.
Mm-hmm.
So for the next X number of weeks, there will be bands and comedy on the same shows. And as a result of how they have responded positively to her work, she's been given some airtime to do comedy specials as well. So she's going to be doing several of those.
Nice.
I don't want to say the wrong number, so I won't say a number, but it's several.
Awesome.
And so if you're listening or watching and you do stand up, you should be thinking about trying to get in touch with her to try and get on one of those shows.
Right.
Sorry.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. I, however, have nothing coming up whatsoever, so I ain't doing shit other than hosting an open night tomorrow, and then Monday after that, I'll be inside of one of my closets crying and trying to get rid of the pain. But thank you so much for showing up, man. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Signing off for the DisJointed podcast, I'm Dave Germain.
I'm Mike Langworthy. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Have a great week, guys.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
I thought
That was pretty awesome. That was great.
it was a lovely conversation from my point of view, and I don't think I dominated.